talk show is brought to you by...
Hey, want to feel young again? Are you tired, run down, have aches and pains, brain fog? This is science-based, not hype or fancy marketing. It really works. Carbon 60 helps detoxify your body on the cellular level. It stabilizes free radicals, just like the antioxidants found in red wine and berry stew, but on a far smaller, more bioavailable nanoscale. It's like a bottle of electrons, helping your body to function better. You can also apply it on your skin topically, over muscles, joints, or organs. Most people feel results within minutes. This is not a drug. It's organic carbon. Feel better today. About 95% of our users report more energy and clarity of mind within 10 days. Give us a call at Greska's Carbon 60 at 720-600-6040 or visit our site at c-60.com. Call 720-600-6040 and feel young again.
Folks, welcome back to the NBC Network, iHealth Radio. This is the H Factor, and today I have a nice show that we're going to have a good discussion with a guest that we've been trying to put this together for almost a year now. We've had a couple of reschedules, things happen in life. As we know, everybody's busy, things do come up. But as he had said, persistence, and we made it happen. And today is the day where we're going to do this, and we're going to have some discussion. And, with me today, we're going to talk about conflict resolution, and we're going to talk about, different things and how to deal with some things and operate in the real world in a way that is decent. And my guest specializes into this, and he has a very interesting background too. So we're going to go through all that stuff. And he's a dancer, and we're going to talk about that too. So, so with me today, Jerry Fu. He is a conflict resolution coach. And specifically for the Asian American leaders, right? That's the key. And so we're going to learn about that. And I love that concept because there is a reason behind it. So first thing, without any further ado, Jerry, I'm really excited about this, right? So,
Me too.
I want to hear about this whole conflict piece because I think we have a problem in this world and we can't handle it. So Jerry, let's talk about first your background, and because being a pharmacist, that's actually your main stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you go from there? I mean, to what do you do today? Let's go there.
Yeah, sure. So to kind of touch on the big things to give the 10,000-foot flyover, I was born in the U.S. to Taiwanese immigrants, right? And so being a child of immigrants, you struggle to belong, right? Because on one hand, your Mandarin's not good enough for your Taiwanese relatives, and then everyone's just picking on you and telling you to go back to Japan because that's apparently where I belong. And so you're already struggling with a sense of belonging, which means that you're ripe for approval addiction and people pleasing, right? So I'm this kid, I'm feeling lonely, and I just want, people to like me, right? And so that sets in some very dangerous habits that I'm sure people can pick up on, where when people are upset with me, I usually just back down or take the path of least resistance, right? Doesn't matter if I'm upset, I'm not allowed to express that because, that's either you're being disrespectful or, you wouldn't want someone to hurt your feelings. So let me just suppress this and just maybe eventually I'll get over it. So this is the kind of person I grew up to be by the time I hit like college or pharmacy school, right? It's just, hey, let me just feel like I can get along. Let me just fit in, even if it's to my detriment, right? And again, I realized I took a lot of life personally when I realized every immigrant kid goes through this. And, on one hand, I'm not alone. On the other hand, I still have to find a way to kind of run my own race a little better, right? So, again, in line with this people-pleasing nature, I get into pharmacy school. I finish pharmacy school. I work for a chain pharmacy when I first start because my mother wants me to have the stability that my father never had. My dad had 2 master's degrees, still struggled to find gainful employment because he was considered overqualified. Can you imagine like a worse reason to not get hired? And so my mom's like, even though she had never worked a day in her life in pharmacy, moms know best, right? And they say, yeah, these are the benefits. enjoy them, please. And the thing about that is that you don't realize that the grass really isn't that greener on the other side. Like, it has its own set of problems. And so after 5 years of pharmacy work that I was tolerating but not ultimately happy with, I knew I had to change something. And so I leveraged my connections to get a teaching position at a pharmacy consulting company that I moved from Tennessee down to Houston for. And so this is where the roller coaster gets really interesting, because I thought initially that this would be the last job I ever needed. This would be the last company I ever needed to work for. But I got fired 11 months later. And, it was my fault. I tell people, I at my previous company, right, if a patient was upset, and I could just placate them and I'd go home upset, or people would be upset with me if I dropped the ball, but I was too good at my job for them to really write me up or hold me accountable for anything. They just gave me a lot of rope and they said, well, we're mad at him, but it never got to the point where they'd actually fire me. But this company, on the other hand, said, we are paying you to get a job done, not to give us stories as to why you didn't have to get it done. And that was a lesson I did not appreciate until many years later, when I became a manager and had to fire people as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself with that with that bit of information. So yeah, the first reality check was getting fired from this company that I thought I would never get fired from. And that was at the time, it was just really tough to know that I'd burned some bridges for some people who had helped me even get the position. And so then the second reality check happened when I stumbled into a job where 4 of my paychecks bounced filling for crooked doctors. So not only was I jeopardizing my license, the guy wasn't even paying me. And how do you confront a guy who's clearly ripping you off, right? When we talk about conflict, right? And it's just, you see this theme over and over again. Oh, well, I don't want to upset anybody, even though I'm upset. And again, just, I didn't know how to break through that for a long, long time. Fast forward a couple months, my friends helped me get out of that shady job, but with a company that can't pay me more than 8 hours a week. And so now I said, well, what do I do? And they said, well, you can get more hours if you cover out our Austin location, which is 2.5 hours away. It's a great city. I could end up in worse places. So beggars can't be choosers. I go out to Austin. Great work, team. Didn't feel like home. Didn't know what my life would look like at that point, because now Houston was starting to feel like home. That summer was key. This was 11 years ago now. The summer was key because some friends who run a pharmacy leadership nonprofit said, hey, one of our facilitators backed out. We'd love for you to step in to help teach this material. And I said, absolutely. I love you guys. I want to do this. And so teaching leadership changed something in the way I thought about myself, and seeing leadership modeled for me with a partner who really brought out the best in me. And I had to ask myself, how in the world did he do that? And so now I'm thinking to myself, before it was, like, leadership is hard. I'm not good at it. I tried a couple times. People didn't do what I said. And I just must not be good at it, or will never be good at it after, 2 or 3 tries and failures. But now I said, well, what if I could be good at it, right? I gave myself permission for what's possible. And I said, well, how would I carry myself? What kind of work would that involve? And so I'm all fired up now, right? And a full-time manager position opened up in Houston that fall. And I said, wow, love my Austin team, can't stay safe. I got to try this out, got to take on this challenge. I want to sleep my own bed again. So again, very short-sighted. Finally I get to come back to Houston, and I'm set. And then 11 months later, for some reason, that's the magical number. 11 months later, I get written up, actually, because I have technicians who are not pulling their weight, and I am not confronting them, writing them up, or firing them, because one in particular needed to be fired. And so leadership said, well, their behavior is a problem and your passivity is a problem. Grace is a nice reason to not engage, but that is a cop-out in this case, right? So while I'm on probation, the company has their funding pulled, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I was going to try to leave anyway, but I said, well, what do I do? And randomly, an opportunity fell into my lap to apply for, and the only reason I even get an interview now was that I had leadership experience on my resume. So I said, leadership saved my career, because now it's starting to open doors that I didn't have access to otherwise. That said, the jobs that I was finding would only last like 1 or 2 years. They were like icebergs. Like, I'd hop from one iceberg to the next, it would melt, and then I'd keep jumping. And
I love that.
Yeah. And for some reason, miraculously, my current job has actually lasted 6.5 years. And, is now ironically the longest tenure job I've had in my 18-year career. But at the time in 2017, until this job came about, I said, I'm tired of fighting insurance contracts that dictate my worth or just, kill us financially. I'm tired of begging scripts from doctors to keep us alive. But I love this people development piece. What if I tried to have a career as a coach or facilitator full time? And of course, I was so scared of rejection and failure that it just remained a hobby for several years. And I didn't know how to start a business, build a business, right? Scale a business. And I decided to get some formal coach training in 2020, right as, guess what? The pandemic ramps up. Yeah, ta-da! And yeah, right. And so it was funny because thankfully my day job, my boss has never missed a payroll. And, thankful for that. But I knew between turning 40 and the pandemic, I said, okay, how much longer am I going to put this dream off? Because now I was talking to people that told me, hey, here's how you file an LLC, start a business bank account. I know a guy who can get a website up for cheap. I said, all right, let's do this. And the first year, I was just terrified because I was like, where do I find money? What do I do with that? And you realize if you don't like rejection, like your business will not get off the ground. If you don't know how to negotiate, you will not get the rates that you feel like are worth your time and effort, right? And so again, this aversion to conflict just keeps coming up again and again. And so that's kind of where things are now. That's where the transition from pharmacy to leadership happens. And the consistent obstacle in my way in order to get better as a leader was initiating and navigating difficult conversations, because it happened all over the place, right? Not just in my professional setting. I was doing a lot of church volunteerism. I had to confront a sexual predator in the class I just became a director for. At one point, I had to evict a roommate because he defaulted on his lease, and he basically hid in his room and dared me to actually call the cops to have him escorted off for trespassing, right? And so it's just every angle was about, hey, are you going to have this conversation or not? And that's why I just said, you know what, I'm going to turn around and said, when I decided on a niche, I said, you know what, I know Asian leaders that were like me 10 years ago that struggle with this, and why not help them navigate these challenges a little more effectively, right? Let's like shorten the learning curve just a little bit so that they can actually move on to more meaningful challenges. So that is the initial piece to start off with, and feel free to pick at it however you want.
Wow. Well, I'm going to pick a lot of, there's quite a bit there that we can literally expend in the whole hour. Well, first things first. Wow. I mean, it's an amazing transitional story. And so I want to go back all the way to the start.
Sure.
I mean, you started with the idea of being the son of immigrants and not belonging. And by the way, you said it best. I mean, you're not the only one. There's millions of people in your shoes. Listen, I would consider my kids the same as you. I mean, I'm an immigrant personally, and while sometimes I can finagle it easy that I got luckier, I guess, in a way, but many don't have, as zero generation or generation zero, I would call them. It's different. That's your parents, and then but you are the new, I guess, formula, the new person in the States where, wait, this is your home. There is no, I mean, that's your parents' home, but this is it. And you have to belong in both cultures. You have to belong in, you're really Taiwanese, but you're not Taiwanese. And by the way, like you belong, but you don't belong. You do want to belong, but you're not. And by the way, that goes for any ethnic background. And it's very difficult because in a way, to your point, you're being perceived as still immigrant. I mean, people look at you and they decide. I mean, unfortunately, that's just how it is, these days. Hopefully better changing over time. And then, and then they hear you, that's like, well, you don't sound like an immigrant. You're really like, I mean, if I hear you on the radio, those that are watching right now, they just not going to know, right? Unless you say it, they're not going to know. And so you have that part. And then the parents are also like under pressure because they want you to be like, we want you to integrate. You want to be it. Yeah. But then your family may not be so keen on that because you're a little bit of a, well, you don't speak the language really. You're like, they make fun of you. I mean, listen, I have that same thing with my kids. I mean, people make fun of them when they speak, our dialect. I'm originally from Morocco, so that can be a little bit interesting, and we make jokes about it. But it is a difficult task, but it is a very hard to be in your position. You're the transitional, generation.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe your kids will have a whole different, spin on things. They may not even speak. I mean, I don't know if you teach them, the Mandarin and the local dialects, but
Mhm.
if you are, that's great. I mean, you want to keep that culture and the traditions going, and I
Yeah.
admire that. But it is sometimes it gets dissipated and eventually it gets
Mhm.
lost over. I mean, I know generations that may not speak the
Mhm.
grandparents or the parents' language, and
Mhm.
sometimes that is a loss. So, and I love that you kept with your heritage, and that's the other thing.
Mhm.
Now, I love what you said about your mom talking
Mhm.
about a career path. Now,
Mhm.
as you said, oh, by the way, I want to touch on what you said about your dad.
Sure.
2 master's degrees,
Mhm.
and that is a reality of things, folks. I mean, as you are more educated, as you are more in a higher level in terms of a, I guess, career path, it is always going to be harder for you to find a similar job because there's less and less of those. The transition, the time frame that it'll take to actually get hired when you're in a high position is always higher. And if you're too overqualified, no one wants to take you for a regular job because they think you're just going to park for a minute and then you're not going to give them what's best. And so it becomes a challenge. And some people see the value of you and they might give you a shot. But some people is like, or some people are maybe intimidated because you're too overqualified. You might be knowing more than them, and they don't want to give you that shot because they don't want you to take their spot. I mean, there's all these things that can happen, and this falls right into the conflict idea is that it is a conflict in its own. Like, how do you present your character as like, well, I have this education, you can hide it. I mean, you could literally take it off your resume, but
Mhm.
then they do a background and it shows up, it's a problem. It's like, well, and you tell them, well, I didn't want to put it there because you would probably not look at me because I'm too overqualified. That's a
Mhm.
problem.
Yeah.
And it is hard, right? I mean, and I know it was a struggle. So your mom was just trying, like, well, we want to do something right. I want you to go to a formal school.
Mhm.
I want you to get to these things that are guaranteed. And a pharmacy is a guaranteed business. When you're a pharmacist, you're a pharmacist.
Yeah.
You can open your own, you can work, and of course, to open your own, it requires funding, it requires a lot of money. It's not cheap. I looked into it with a friend of mine who was a pharmacist. That's a lot of money. So we never did. but
Mhm.
but 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 so you wind up also working at a franchise pharmacy, if you want to call it that way, like a box pharmacy
Yeah.
and or corporate pharmacy. And you're right, they it's guaranteed. You move from store to store. You run one store and you doing a thing, and that's it. And you did that for a few years, and that was a good thing. Um, but the concept of where you transited into the conflict or job from job, and I love what you said about those icebergs. They just melt and you go to the next one. That's a good description. Listen, everybody tries to find themselves, set themselves in a career path, and sometimes it takes more than expected, because when you don't know anything and all you knew is that pharmacy business that you were in and you did exactly that, that was one thing. But when you go out of that, I guess, formal system and or repetitive system, it's really just calculated. You come in, you check in, you know what you do, boom,
Mhm.
boom, boom, you prescribe, you're out, you're done. And it's different when someone comes in and says, my prescription, this, that, and you can handle it. But now you
Mhm.
went to a different world where you were in the, I guess, the freelance world or the free
Mhm.
world.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about shady, provider who
Mhm.
writes stuff that and or insurance. By the
Mhm.
way, I'm an insurer myself, so
Yeah.
we can talk about that. I know you guys don't like us a lot in the pharmacy world, but again, it's not that I mean, there's formularies, right? Most of these companies have formularies, and some participate in some. They covered some drugs and no drugs and tiers and all that stuff. It becomes complicated. And we don't have to go into the pharmacy tech today, but it is
Okay.
a difficult task. But you're right. I mean, it is sometimes difficult because your career, your finances, everything is attached to like what pays, who pays, and whether it's a risk there or not. And definitely you do not want to lose your license that
Yeah.
you work so hard for. So these are all things that you have. So again, for our listeners out there, you might relate to what we're talking about in any particular career path, and also
Mhm.
you might relate to it in terms of belonging, in terms of culture, in terms of being a
Mhm.
generation versus the other. And by the way, if we look back in the States, we can almost touch back on every person that exists here, other than the
Mhm.
native, indigenous, folks of the U.S. And the Americas. I mean,
Mhm.
everybody comes from lineage from a different part of the world, and yeah, we can go back one generation, two, three, four, five, maybe six tops, and that's it. But we're not
Mhm.
that far back, as a whole, and it is something that sometimes we tend to forget, and sometimes we don't look at it, but we have to look at it from the lens that people are here. There's a reason why they're here. Now, I mean, we're not going to go into the immigration stuff and all that. That's a conflict in its own in terms of the discussion part. But it's a tough discussion because you have politics involved in there, and there's the pros and the cons and all the stuff. But neither here or there. I mean, people are here for a reason, for a better life, and as much as we might not think that the American dream exists the way it was presented, years back. It has shifted. It's not, the same. I mean, there's other dreams around the world these days, but the fact is, there is some of that, that has that glimpse, or that has that some root. A lot of people do come here for that purpose. They just want a better life and opportunity, and there is opportunity. I mean, at the end of the day, it is still better than most of the places around the world where you could, if you wanted something bad, you can achieve it here. If you wanted to get studies and you want to get a degree, you can do it at any age. I mean, some countries, they don't even allow you to do that, right? So we have opportunity. And that's, again, just for this piece of the discussion, it's really relevant to highlight. Now we'll talk about your struggle with, the conflict piece. The first one is you being an employee and just kind of not being able to deliver, and you're terminated. By the way, we're not talking about terminated as in the Terminator. We're talking an HR term here. So being fired, as you clearly stated, or being removed from your position, one way or the other. That is a difficult task. Now, I know people are watching. No one wants to be fired from a job. Okay, let's be clear. But a job is a job. You join a job, and there's two ways to exit the job: either you voluntarily or involuntarily. And there are things that can happen why you can do both ways. And by the way, if you don't like something that you do, it's best to just walk away. Now, people don't usually do that because they'd rather be terminated or fired, because you might qualify for unemployment and other things, and gives you a transitory, chance. So there's some technicalities to those things, and we're not going to that I guess trench right now. But the idea is that it's there. But listen, I have been an employee. I've led teams. I've had to terminate folks. I've had to hire folks, and it is not an easy job, to be in that position. And I get it. It is hard to have the tough discussions. It is have to have the come to Jesus moments where hey, what's up? You're not delivering. But there is a process to all this. I mean, obviously there's laws and things, and we have to be clear. But most of the people avoid conflict in general, in personal lives, at work, everywhere. We all tend to kind of not get into the discussion, not really go to it. And in time, sometimes you have to. And I love what you said. You transited to become good at it. And, you had a roommate, and you had to face the roommate and say, it's time for you to go, or else, so sometimes you have to toughen up. And, it's not, that's really what it is. You got to build a nice thick skin, and it happens. It's like marriage and divorce, right? I mean, you marry, beautiful, everybody's happy, but then you want divorce and everybody's not happy. But divorce can happen, and it's a matter of like, is this going to work any further, or maybe we have to put an end to it. Same thing with a career path, a job. I actually I use this line all the time, for in interviews. I'm like, listen, right now we're interviewing. If you do get this opportunity, and and obviously you don't tell them that they get the opportunity, but if you do, we're going to have a phase, and the introductory phase is your introductory period of employment or probation, as you stated. Those are our engagement moments, right? So we get engaged, get to know each other. If everything's good, then you pass. Now we get married. Now, married can also end in divorce, right? And that would be where you go bad, and then there's a termination at the end of the process. And by the way, it is not something to be fearful of, one way or the other. Listen, you get terminated here, you go somewhere else, and better. People always have this fear, like, oh my God, if I'm terminated, it's going to end my career. No, sometimes it's actually good for you. You learn and you go somewhere else. Sometimes actually it helps you change career paths. There's many things that can come out of it, and it is really just an agreement disconnect. It's nothing more than that. And we feared, because it's like, oh my God. Is it going to affect you in your career path? Sometimes in an industry, yes, it could be where you're into, well, you can't hire so on and so forth. And by the way, for the most part, most of the companies, they're not going to call your last employer, because you have that option to select, do not call my previous employee. And they're not. And even when they call, they have restrictions on what they can ask and what they cannot ask for. So there is that. So, but the concept of conflict, it happens all the time between you and your staff, between you and your friends, between you and your family. I'm sure I don't know if you have siblings, you do have conflict resolution. We start conflicts since we're kids. I mean, you you need to resolve these things, as early on. But some people try to avoid, and they deflect and they absorb things. And they allow the things to get in, and that's another problem because sometimes, because I don't want to say the obvious, I'll take the high road, as they say, or just walk away or turn the cheek away. Sometimes you got to face things head on. I mean, don't be an ostrich and just put your head down and think like, hey, nothing is happening. It is happening. So the best way is it's like, someone is throwing a punch at you and you turn your face. I mean, good luck. You want to be face to face, at least to see what's going on. So I
Mm.
just wanted to just break down some of the stuff that we had, and then we
Yeah.
can deep dive on. Now let's talk about the leadership piece. I mean, you
Yeah.
talked about you had a facilitator role,
Hmm.
and and I want to spend some time there. And
Sure.
as a facilitator or a trainer, you are teaching these people certain things.
Hmm.
Now, ultimately, we're told, in one of the jobs, that you didn't do a good job because they were not able to perform.
Hmm.
Now, to be personally, I don't think that was your role. I think if they do have their own leaders, they should be the ones who are actually reinforcing
Hmm.
stuff. You give instruction, you give certain things. Now, I don't know the job description, to be clear about it,
Hmm.
but typically a trainer is not responsible for the performance of the people. They're
Hmm.
responsible to give them the knowledge and the skills. But
Yeah.
then there are their leadership teams or management, that will hierarchies that can actually help them get to the next level, right?
Hmm.
So, but again, I don't know the situation and why you were the one to blame, but that's neither here nor there. It told you better, and now you're actually
Hmm.
doing more. But then you translate it into really training leaders,
Hmm.
and so now there's a concept of leadership. Now, first of all, leaders think that they know everything, right? That's in a way. I mean, they're leaders, and by the way, that's a wrong thing. Not every leader is a true leader, and not every
Hmm.
leader knows everything. We're always supposed to be learning. I consider myself a leader, but I've proven, a track record of being a true leader over years.
Hmm.
And what it means to me is that I was able to deliver, I was able to guide teams to success and so on and so forth. I was able to generate leaders as well and coach others and mentor others into leadership roles. It doesn't make me know in all. It means that just I have a certain way to do certain things and learn. But that doesn't mean I cannot learn. I am learning today from you. I am learning every day. You always learn. And so that's it. But having to teach someone that's novice is one thing. To teach someone that's in a leadership role, that's a tough one. How do you see yourself? I mean, how was that perceived from like someone in, especially when you didn't have the experience? Once you became in a role of leader, it's different. You can say, oh, well, I was managing teams, I was leading teams. But if you didn't have that, it would be like, someone who has no knowledge trying to teach someone with the knowledge. It becomes a serious conflict. So how did you maneuver through this?
Yeah. Yeah. It's how do people actually become competent and effective, right? Like a big thing for me, and this is a common theme, right? How do you experience success when you've how do you achieve success when you've never experienced it, right? And so uh success breeds success, but if you don't know how to achieve that success, right, it's kind of hard for people to just kind of swim around in the dark and maybe you'll find your way out of the pool, right? But what helped
Right.
me was when I had my co-facilitator and I basically took the time to study his approach with me, right? And I said, okay, he's fun to be around. Like he's warm and approachable, right? If you're scared, you don't have to be scared to ask him a question if you're concerned about something. Number two, he's fun to learn from. He's always learning something interesting, and you're like, huh? Now I'm curious. Now I want to learn that too. Third, he's always tinkering. Like he's always saying, "How can I make this better? Let's shuffle things around." And what do you think of this? And so that was the fourth part: is that he's collaborative. He's inviting me to say, "Hey, look, I lined some things up. I want your thoughts on this." And basically he just had confidence that I had the ability to contribute. Right. And then number five, he was a tireless worker. He set the tone well with his work ethic. Right. So you look at these tangible things and you realize, much to your point, right, there's two big factors with any leadership situation or setup, right, where you have influence and then you have a title. There are people who carry the title but don't have any influence, right? No one respects them. They say salute the rank, not the man, right? But there are presidents who people don't respect. Doesn't matter if they're president, right? Again, won't get into politics, but I'm sure people can figure out what the kind of names we're talking about, right? Then there's people who don't have a title, but they have a lot of influence, right? Like Mother Teresa, right? That's the easy example, right? To say, well, she never held a big political office, but everyone takes her seriously, even the people with big titles, right? And so how do you find a way to not only get the title, but have the level of influence that really helps this synergy actually have some impact, right? And so some simple formulas for influence are, hey, am I visible, right? People need to know that I'm around, that I'm actually doing something, because, quiet, like discreet donations are nice. It's good that you can have a very authentic motive and you're not doing this for show. But if nobody knows you're doing anything, how do you expect to build a case for yourself, right? So what is visibility? How do I show up without showing off? Is the question I usually like to pose to my clients. The second is, okay, how am I adding value to this organization, right? Am I known as a problem solver, right? When people come to me with a situation, do I give good advice? Do I find solutions even when people think there is no solution? Do I help equip people to handle challenges better, right? Do I grow my people well so they are actually, confident to handle their own tasks and able to go above and beyond with their own job duties, right? So title, yes, like if someone promotes you, congratulations, right? Hopefully you've done enough to earn that promotion. And at the same time, how am I continually maintaining and earning trust among the people that are in my sphere of influence, are in my immediate sphere of social connections? So those are, if I had to quantify a formula, which is very hard to do for leadership, but some basic principles to build on, I'd say start there.
So let's go there, because that's pretty big. I mean, in its own. So I love what you said.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reality of things. There's a lot of people out there with
Mm-hmm.
great titles,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like having a shoe that you can't fit because they don't fit the shoe.
Yeah.
That's really, not everybody with a title really belongs in a title. And,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned presidents, and you can be in a president of a government or a president in a company. I've seen, I guess both, fiascos out there, right?
Yep.
In history, we've seen a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But you have people in managerial roles that they have no place to be in a management role.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing. I always tend to differentiate those two things. The managerial role, doesn't matter what status you are, what rank, it is rank. A leader doesn't need a rank. They pretty much, they're leaders because of who they are. Centers of influence. They lead by example. They are out there. They are setting the vision. They're setting the cadence, the pace, and all this stuff. A leader is not absentee. You cannot be an absentee leader and expect to be. They're not feared. They're respectful. I mean, respected. People will follow they'll jump lives for them, because they believe in their vision and the mission, and they believe in their person. And because they are not actually pushing people, they're literally pulling with them. Because that's usually what you find with a title guy or gal. They sit back and they just order people. Leaders don't order. People do, and make sure. So these are all different things. And you're right. If you're not there, well, or if you just get a title, and I love what you said, like, hopefully you earn that right for that rank, because sometimes people don't earn it the right way. Yeah. And that's the other thing. You can be a top performer, doesn't mean that you're qualified to be the next, as a leader or a manager.
Yep.
You can be the best as you can be in one area of expertise, because it's one thing to operate a process and do tasks. And another one is to manage, people, humans. It's conflict of interest is the biggest piece. I remember this when I was a younger person. I was in an internship, and believe it or not, I met this retired French pianist. He was so wise, that dude. I mean, I remember him like yesterday, and we were having discussions, and he was just like sharing with me some stuff as I was there. I mean, I was working in this hotel and, doing the rotation, different services. And every night he was there, and we would just spend some time talking. I just enjoyed the discussion with the dude. Now, I was like 20, and he was literally like in the 60s at the time. But he had so much, experience and stuff. And he was already like, up there. And this was like his retirement thing, and he was doing. And one thing he said, it stayed with me all the time, is that he said it. If as you grow in the world and potentially you grow in your business and career path, the one thing that's going to be the most difficult thing is handling and living with others, cooperating with others, coordinating with others, and really having an interactive world discussions with people. Because the conflict of interest is going to be always, or the conflict, is a human conflict is going to be always a factor. You have to be careful of that. And he gave me that advice. This is like 34 years ago, right? What, 32, just to give you the exact age. But really, that's long ago, but it stood with me. And actually, I found exactly what he said real as I started my career path. Because one of the biggest problems you will find is people that are with you, how to work with them, how do
Mm.
you maneuver. One of the things that I've learned over the years is to be a little bit of diplomatic. I mean, you have to use some diplomacy, but you also can be, blunt. You can be direct, but you have
Mhm.
to know it's not what you say, it's how you say it and the approach that you use. And it has to be validated. That's the other thing. I can't go, well, Jerry, you're not doing a good job. Well, no, I do. I'm doing a terrific job. Well, see, now if I come in like that, you're gonna get offended, right?
Yep.
But if I come to you with the present, listen, we've had so many things that were supposed to be done, and these were the things, and is there anything that made you not do these things? Well, I don't know how to do these things, right? I wasn't
Mm.
trained. See, like now I can see what I used literally as a trick is that I want to know because I want to be sure that when I have that discussion, that tough, discussion with you, that you had all the opportunity to be clear, to be understanding,
Mm.
to know what your task and your job, and so on and so forth. And by the way, truly, sometimes you inherit a team, for example, as a leader,
Yeah.
and you don't know what to do with them because they're expected to, they're expecting something else because whoever had them
Mhm.
before may not have done a good job.
Yep.
And vice versa, it could be the opposite. But
Yeah.
in general, if they never got training, they never were told, they never given the right direction of how to do and how to operate, then you can't blame them. They know what they know. So it's
Yeah.
a matter of understanding. You have to reach out and reach in and really get into the deep dive with these folks. Then understand. Now, once you
Mhm.
establish that and you put all that criteria, now the discussion becomes a lot easier, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you literally talking to these folks that have the leadership roles. And first of all, have you seen, which I'm almost positive the answer will be yes, that there were some of them that really didn't belong there.
Oh, of
And if they
course.
were you in a position to actually change that?
Yeah. So there's a couple different situations we could unpack, right? Whether it's for my clients or just, and my own work team, right?
Oh, yeah,
So,
please.
so a quick example just from my day job, which I like to call my leadership lab, right? I have to see if like the leadership concepts I read about actually stick with my team. And so there was a point, right, where one of my lead technicians, uh, I hired her from a previous company because of her title, but I didn't do the legwork to say, well, just because she has the title, are people really listening to her? Does she have a lot of influence? Does she actually pull her weight? And we learned quickly that she knew how to deflect. She knew how to defend herself, but she would not take responsibility. She wasn't coachable. And now, right now, it's just this cavity that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And then you just realize, oh, like she's very knowledgeable, but she doesn't want to take responsibility because she's comes from a culture where like if mistakes like can get you fired, then she just wants to make sure that she's responsible for as few mistakes as possible, even though the opposite approach would be true, right? And so that is one side where you realize you're like, okay, she should not be in a leadership position. She should not be with the company. So yeah, after enough deliberation, yeah, we finally pushed her out the door. Right. So yeah, she didn't belong there. And that was hard to fire her, but we had to do it. Same thing with my clients, right? One client told me about a team he inherited, and there was a guy that had been there for like 7 or 8 years, really great technically, was mad that he was never considered for management or leadership, right? But two previous supervisors, whenever they tried to address areas that he needed improvement on, he would just lock up. Right. We like to joke people think they're coachable until you find an opportunity or an area that they don't want to be coachable about. Right. It's like, well, yeah, I'm pretty good. Well, about this thing with like, like not calling clients back more time. Like, oh, no, that's not right. And you're just like, okay, no, here's where the problem lies. Right. This is exactly why you're not getting promoted. But if you tell them that, they're just going to lock up even further. And then the conversation will not be productive. So we coached him through, well, hey, right, this 5 steps I walk my clients a lot through just to help them kind of get a game plan. We say, okay, well, what would a good conversation sound like? What would a successful conversation sound like? It's like, well, it could be as easy as, hey, here's the areas that are basically a prerequisite for you to qualify for leadership. If take care of these things, and you're good. Okay, hey, thanks. Maybe it could be that easy. Is it likely? Probably not. But is it possible? And that's all we're going for. Because most people, what do they do with conflict? Oh, this conversation's not going to go well, but I'm going to have it anyway. Well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If it's not going to go well, probably won't go well, right? So that's the first thing. We say, well, let's put a high ceiling just to see what happens. The second step is to find 10 seconds of courage to initiate this conversation, right? And so we say, hey, can you spend 10 seconds to send that email, pick up that phone, send that text, right? You don't have to be a superhero, just be a superhero for 10 seconds. Because if you wait until you feel like you're brave enough to actually have the conversation, it'll be 3 weeks and you'll still be rationalizing. So you want to set the ball in motion, lock the gate behind you and say, okay, nope, this is in motion. I can't back out. Step 3, let's do some strategy. Let's script your critical phrases, right? Hey, here are the main 3 things I want to put on paper and organize to make sure I address these during the conversation. Here's the possible pushback that he's probably going to give me when I try to address areas that need improvement. And here's how I'm going to respond, assuming that's how he responds. Okay, now that we've kind of given some strategy and a roadmap, step 4, let's rehearse these steps, right? Hey, spar with me verbally, right? Let's iron out your phrasing so that you don't trip over your own words in the moment, right? And then step 5, let's follow through. Okay, and ask for permission for this guy, right? Hey, man, as your new leader, I am excited for the opportunity to try to help you get this promotion. And in order to do so, we're going to have to address some areas that are really difficult that previous supervisors struggled to address with you. Are you willing to do this with me and possibly do something different? Well, I guess so. It's like, think long and hard about your answer, right? Because if I try to introduce something and you immediately lock up, this discussion is over, right? I can't help you because I can't endorse this. And so you kind of put the ball in his court, right? And you also position yourself as a guide. Hey, I am not the obstacle to the promotion that you want, but I am the vehicle that you can ride if you are willing to follow my instructions how to drive this car, right? And so now, right, this is what I see, right? Both from a leader standpoint when I have to wear the mantle and wear the title, but also when I'm a coach, when I'm not directly accountable for the result that I'm helping orchestrate with my clients.
Jerry, thank you. That was perfect. And you've touched on a few things that are very important to our listeners in this case. One is, I love what you said. Like someone who had expectations, to grow, and every time they felt that they were not, but there is a reason behind it. That's the other thing. People have to be aware. If I can get it if you're my first supervisor or manager, whatever, and I've tried to go up, in the ladder, and you kind of didn't do it. So maybe it's something that you have against me. But then you have a second manager that has the same thing, and you're not going anywhere. Now a third person, and you're still not going anywhere. That's a good question to ask. Like, what am I not doing? And again, that's again accountability one-on-one. I love what you said about the person that you're in charge. You're doing stuff. You have to be accountable. You can't deflect. You have tasks. You have jobs. You have performance metrics that you have to meet. And if you're not able, every time I tell you, like, why is it not happening, you're going to find a reason why it didn't happen. There's always a reason why it not happened, but there's also reasons why it should have happened. And if it's part of your task and your performance, then it has to happen. And that's just clear. I mean, that's just, basic stuff. And it is important. Again, I love what you talked about, that taking responsibility. Like sometimes, yeah, you drop the ball. I get it. I'm sorry. I did it. I understand that's my weakness. And that actually by admitting sometimes, by being clear about what your weakness is, your leader can help you. That's the thing. Like, how can I help you if you're not, like, to your point, you're locked down and you're not allowing me to get in? It's really on you. I love what you said about the ball in your court, because, and that's really what it is. We can do it your way, we can do it my way, but I'm giving you the opportunity to advance. I'm giving you the opportunity to improve. But I can't, it's like when you talk to clients, you want to do some probing and assessing their needs. And a leader needs to assess the needs of their folks, right? And then ultimately, by assessing, they can address certain things and work in areas that they can help them improve to the next level. Now, is that guaranteeing that person is going to go to the next level? Probably not a guarantee. However, depends in if first of all, there's another person maybe more qualified or better, suited for the role. That's one. Two, they could, but sometimes even if you do all the improvement, nothing is happening. As you said, eventually you had to, get that person out. It happens too. But setting expectations is a key element that we should all have in personal life. In business is definitely a must. To me, if you are a leader to a team, the first thing that the team, whether you're at the president level or any supervisory role, first thing you need to have is the ability to clearly state what the vision, what the mission, what is ahead of us, and people have to understand what's going on. If they know what's the end game, they will be part of it. You will basically make them part of that, growth. They understand what's the fight, what are they doing. But if you just we want to do this and you just got to do it, now you're a dictator and you're not going to get that influence and that buy-in and the stuff. It is a simple thing. Now, someone can argue with me like, well, it's not a democracy. It's not. But yes, that's true. There are executive decisions and we got to do. But sometimes if you're doing it not realistically, if you're setting goals that are not feasible or you're expecting people to jump hoops that they can, then you're just setting the whole team to fail. So you have to be, balanced and understanding what your capabilities are in the first place. You also have to know who you have on your team. Not everybody is equally suited. I mean, they all can have the same degree, but some people are good at one thing versus the other. And do you know how to maneuver your team according to the task that you can? Are they playful? Are they less? Can you move people around so you can actually get them in a better position that can get them more success? That's the other. Sometimes we set people in the wrong role and expect them to deliver better. Ain't going to happen. It's all these things that do happen. And so I love what you said about, the way you break it down to them and have that, here it is. It's in your court now. I am here for you. I am here to support you. I'm not here to just, and that may open them up to like, okay, so now someone can say, well, that's just an HR thing that you're trying to avoid, lawsuits and stuff, and these cases. While you have to be, mindful of all the laws and how you do it, and this is pure, coaching and training, and really, I need you to be, good. Now, if there's something that I have against you as a human, that becomes more an HR problem. But if this is pure performance and the numbers don't play, they're not lying, you're not doing XYZ, you're not communicating properly, you're not doing so on and so forth. Guess what? It is my role to address those things. Now, you have two choices. You can accept what I'm telling you and absorb and learn from there and allow me to help you, or you can be stubborn and say, I got this, and you're not getting anything done. And then I'm going to have to come back and say, we had this conversation a month ago. You were supposed to do X, Y, Z. I offered my help. It's documented. It's all done. We've given you the opportunity to train and coach and stuff, but you're not still doing it. Now let's go. Now we're going to have an HR person present and we're going to have a different discussion. See, it's two different ways. But the best way, as you said, is that the ability to sit up, whether you are the one who's reprimanding or you are the one who's coaching, how to, to bring that to people. Because sometimes people have a fear to do that. I mean, especially a newbie, someone who is first time in a leadership role, they tend to be tougher and or weaker. Two things. Either they're over tough because they want to like, I'm the manager, and or the other one is like, I don't want to piss them off. I want to be cool. I want to be liked.
Yeah.
It's both of those are bad. Being liked is a bonus, and that would be nice. A true leader doesn't have to be liked, but they will be appreciated. They will be respected. And that's all there is. Once you earn that respect of the team, they will like you anyways. It comes in as a plus. But that's the other thing. But they also know that you're about, not a person. You will take care of people. But if someone doesn't perform, you're not shy away from the idea that, hey, listen, it's time to have a discussion and let's go on a disciplinary action or a PIP, process, right? So it's a pretty thing, but it takes a lot of energy. People have the fear. I love what you said, that you are preparing them, in those steps to be ready for that discussion. Most people are not ready for that discussion. Initially, if this is the first time they have it. Now, in time, you become an expert. You can talk and talk and talk. But if you're not, and you're afraid that what if I said the wrong thing? What if this person comes back and, deflects and uses different things that I didn't know? And the other thing I would say is that you need to also know your stuff. You need to do your homework about stuff, have data to sustain, and support whatever you're actually going to have a discussion with. You guys are like, well, you're not doing a good job. Well, what gives? Well, that's why your supervisor told me. I was told that you're not a good, employee. That's not going to fly. What flies is like, show me the numbers. Show me, here's your task. Here's your job description. Here's what you've been doing. Here's where we are. Here's your role that are similar and where the performance is and where you are. You are on the lower, performance level here. That's a problem. We need to bring you up. If you did a good job at that, you're going to get a good, feedback, good acceptance, and probably a good outcome. And so that, I think that's my little 2 cents in there. So what are some of the mistakes people make in your expertise that you've encountered currently? And I'm sure you're doing this over and over for a few years now. What are some of the conflict issues that you find are being really driven by a bad mistake somewhere where it shouldn't have happened and it's happening?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, guys. I've made all these mistakes too. So this is the way. This is from learning and growing together. So
I think we all did.
Yeah. I don't want we don't want people to think he's some artful dodger that's like, oh, he's never failed. It's like, no, you fail all the time. That's how you learn. So some of the mistakes that I know I've made and I see a lot of people make in their discussions are, number one, they go in with a justified story that isn't yet verified, right? So let's take a simple example, even just between friends, right? Let's say, oh, I was supposed to meet my friend Joe for a movie and he did not show up. And so now I'm sitting there thinking, he's just not that reliable, right? And then he never comes through for me when I need him to. And then, you find out Joe had a family emergency and like his phone was like low on battery and he couldn't call you back even after you tried several times, right? And now there's egg on your face because you just was like, oh, well, I justified my story and it felt right to me, but I didn't actually find out what the truth was, right? So that's the first problem. And the second common mistake in line with that is listening to respond and not listening to listen, right? And so people are just ready to jump in and interrupt, and that just escalates the situation, right? Because it means instead of actually taking in what the person has to say and actually caring about what they have to say, you're too busy, you're focused on defending yourself as soon as you hear something you think is going to make you look bad, or be like, I don't want to admit that I could take responsibility for that. So yeah, that's another thing. The third is conflict to conform and not collaborate, right? When we insist to say, this is the solution, this is what I need you to do, and this is why I need you to do it, and anything less than that will be unacceptable, as opposed to saying, hey, so now that we agree on a problem, right, what do you and I need to do together so that this doesn't happen again, right? Like which approach is probably going to get a better response, right? One where the other person can offer their take and get more buy-in, or one that says, no, I'm just going to twist your arm until you agree to do what I need to say, and here's why, right? Even if you have your reasons, that's a dangerous place to be, because you keep insisting that you are right and you are not open to other possibilities that might actually be better than what you think you came up with.
Thank you. And Jerry, you touched on a very important piece, which is, if you are going to be in a position of leadership that you're going to have a discussion with anyone, mm-hmm. you do want to be active listening, and really, to your point, not just jump to conclusions. You need to hear and be able to have the because again, if you're just listening or like you're like just ready to fire back or anticipate an answer, that's the other thing. Sometimes people anticipate, oh no, we're not going to go there, and you haven't even heard the whole thing. You just want to, because you want to make your point. Sometimes take it slow, absorb everything, and be able to actually come back. So you stated this, and then you break it down. So I love what that's a big piece. I love what you said about, give people the benefit of the doubt. And that's what I said. You gotta have some support and wait to see like what that excuse. Now, if it's a blunt excuse, you won't know. But if it's legitimate, everybody, we're human. We're not robots, and this is not like command press and then it's going to go like, ChatGPT, it's going to respond to you. Even ChatGPT will tell you, I can't answer that question. I've only learned up to 2021. Yeah. Literally that's the response when you ask question to ChatGPT that it doesn't know. The same thing. Not everybody, we don't know everything.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. You have to be as you have to be able to accept, some comeback from these folks, because this is, again, it's not dictatorship. They let them speak. At the end of the day, it's the facts and the stuff. It makes a difference. And they'll appreciate you more that way, because if they think that you're up to get them and you are making that obvious, then they're gonna basically like shield up.
Yeah.
If they think that you're there to support them and you're not there, I mean, even when I've had cases where people knew that they made something wrong and they come in for an actual tough discussion, but they're coming in with the mind that it still can be good, because I don't just come in like, listen, XYZ happened. Let's talk. What was the reason?
Yeah.
And then they start talking, and then, okay, well, so you mean to tell me that's why? And then when sometimes I realize, personally, this happened to me, I realized that there was something behind that I wasn't aware of in my operation or something else. And then I'm like, okay, well, so I'll take that. Let me look into it. And then I work with that, because, like, I'm just not going to make that, and sometimes, it's just a hoax story and I know it's not there because I already got the other feedback. But so you don't just jump to conclusions and expect, to get the best outcome. So those things, I mean, by the way, those are mistakes that I also made originally when I started, because when I became a manager, I was very young, and, my mentor literally taught me one thing, like, it's this or else. I mean, it was literally like, if you don't do this, you're out. If you don't do this, you're dead. So in a way, I learned that, and so it became that, and became me. But for a minute, I didn't like it, and so I swear I didn't like it, because I realized that's not how I wouldn't want people to talk to me like that. So why would I have to do that? So I switched my approach, and I learned to do it in a different way, and it became better and better. So I learned from my own mistake not to do it that way, and to get more from people. Instead of shielding up, they open up to you, and they know that you're not really against them. You are there to support them. So that's an important. Now, leadership. What are some of the questions that you will ask some of these leaders, to identify their issues?
Yeah. There's a great book called The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier, and he goes over 7 questions that any leader should use in their leadership style, just to incorporate just a little bit of a coaching style, just to help kind of grow people and help them process. And I list some of them, in the profile that you're looking at. And one of them is usually just to start with, say, hey, well, what are you learning, right? When they come to me a situation, normally they're like, Jerry, just fix it, right? They're in crisis mode. They're like, Jerry, just fix it. And we're like, okay, why don't we slow down? What are you learning from this, moment? And then they start to slow down and start to process. And they're like, you know what? I learned that, punctuality is something that people easily mess up, right? Or people easily neglect that rule because they don't want to admit that it's beneficial just to even be on time, and even a couple minutes late can cause problems. It's like, okay, so if we know that this is a problem, the second question then, well, what's the real challenge here for you? It's like, oh, okay, so the real challenge is not that people are late, but that I feel disrespected when people are late, right? It's like, oh, okay, so now that you've uncovered there's feelings and a lot of internal processing that's actually the issue, and not just the surface level action. Number 3, which is my favorite, which is another great question. Well, what is your next action, right? What are you going to do about this, right? What is your next action is a particularly popular question because it cuts out the victim mentality. It's a great way to cut through complaining, because people are too busy focusing now, okay, I need to move forward and I need to do something active about it. So what will this be? It's like, hey, all right, let me pull aside this person that's frustrating me and let me get curious about, what are the reasons they keep showing up late, right? Kind of like to not fall back into some of the mistakes we mentioned earlier in the conversation. Hey, I have my mind made up about why this person's late. They're just, they're just slacking and they're just lazy. And I gotta go in there and twist their arm and be like, hey man, just leave 5 minutes earlier. It's like, well, maybe there's a better approach, right? Maybe there are some extenuating circumstances that are unfortunate, but at the same time, you're like, well, hey, how are you going to work around this, right? Get them to come up with solutions. So these are some of the more frequent questions that I use, whether I'm coaching somebody or I have to confront somebody, because sometimes the coaching approach is the best way to confront.
Actually using the 3 stars approach, where you have to get, everything, like, because people will give you partial stuff. You want, it's not, you want to dig in further, get more points until you get the full answer. And that's actually perfect, because you get more out of the discussion. So now you're coaching right now. This is remote, or, I mean, I know you're still in Austin. Are you still in Austin, Jerry?
Yeah, no, there was a blip there. But go ahead and
Yeah.
repeat your question. Yeah.
No,
So
I
you
said,
said I'm still coaching. Yeah.
yeah. So is this remote for you? Like, how does that work? Where you have to be in a location with someone?
Yeah, no, great question. Obviously, after the pandemic, a lot of things went hybrid. So I do have clients that I meet with remotely, but I also have local clients. I contract with my local university here where I live, and yeah. So occasionally we do have clients that do want in-person sessions, and thankfully we're able to do that. And every format has their blessings and challenges, and so we're just thankful that because things are remote, you can have a greater reach that you could ever have if you just only wanted like in-person meetings.
I love it. Now you are what I was going to ask you is, give me here the the link to you.
Yeah.
I have it here as adaptingleaders.com. Is that so that's your website?
Yeah, that's the website. And there's a free guide where I walk through the 5 steps that I mentioned earlier, adaptingleaders.com/guide. GUIDE. I need to update the profile you're looking at, but yeah, that's the free guide that you can offer. In fact, it'll pop up as soon as people go to adaptingleaders.com. So,
Okay, good. So
either
as
way,
long
they'll
as
get it to it. Yeah.
we just wanted them to get you. Now I want to just one more question.
Yeah, go
Asian
for it.
American leaders.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Asian American as in just whole, or is it specific in the industry?
I mean, it's because you could interpret it a couple of different ways. So I'm glad
Right,
you're
that's what,
making
yeah,
this distinction
yeah. I
because you
just want to
could
make
say,
sure.
yeah, absolutely. Well, whether you're an Asian that's born in America, that's technically one form of Asian American. I've also coached people who are biracial, right? They have an Asian parent and an American parent, and then they are Asian American, right? So there's this umbrella theme of, hey, I am I'm in one culture. I grew up in a different culture, or I'm dealing with one culture that's different from the culture I grew up with, and that's really, I think, the bigger thing that we all I need to adapt to in this world that's more connected than ever. But yeah, for people who are familiar with honor shame backgrounds and honor shame cultures, right, that understand, hey, yeah, there's a hierarchy, very command and control authority. Follow the rules and good things will happen, right? This is the kind of culture that I like to coach people through and to help kind of break down some of the barriers and the limiting beliefs that come from that and the scars that need to heal. And yeah, I mean, it's beautiful to see people that realize, hey, you know what? I don't have to be ashamed if there's a rule that I'm breaking in, but it's no longer serving me to follow it, right? And so that's what we're trying to get people to realize. Hey, you know what? Maybe you don't have to follow those rules anymore.
Jerry, thank you. And by the way, I have to say this. I mean, I admire the Asian culture personally. I mean, all of it. I mean, traditions and stuff. And
Yeah.
there's just so much to it. I mean, I've been in the martial arts, so I got
Awesome.
connected to it through there.
Yeah.
And but there's a lot of respect. There's a lot of stuff, and you're right. There's hierarchies. There's expectations, and it causes conflict. Especially, I mean, new generation versus old generation. That's a big difference in approach. So I love that you actually are dedicated to help, all those folks not to go through this and get in, almost like bridging that gap, and making sure that it's easier to operate and navigate, which is sometimes very difficult. So thank you, and I admire that. Now, one more thing. Now, this is for all businesses, or or I mean, in person, like personal stuff and work, or is it just specifically to businesses or business?
Yeah, great question. Let's make this distinction and clarification. So yeah, basically the latest tagline for my business, I'm kind of going through the middle of a rebranding. So it's kind of funny that we rescheduled and things. And basically the idea that I'm focusing on is that I help Asian leaders become more visible, vocal, and valuable. Right. So just hey, let's make sure you flourish right where you are, that you are that people notice and appreciate the work that you do, that you speak up when you need to advocate for yourself, and that, yeah, you can feel good about the level of effort and effectiveness that you bring for your company or your organization, right? And so, yeah, there's this greater theme of I need to chart my own path, right? So not just flourish where I am, but maybe, maybe I take a career that my parents don't agree with, right? And dealing with that conflict there. So there's this really wonderful intersection of, hey, you know what? I need to I want to be able to have this self-assurance that I can handle anything that comes my way, including disagreements over the person I possibly marry. How does my family react to that? Maybe it's the career that my parents think, isn't profitable. My parents, when they found out I started a leadership coaching company, they were like, why? Like, why are you doing this? Like, we don't even know what this is. And that's probably not stable. And to understand and appreciate what they were looking for and what they wanted from me, and to understand, hey, you know what? I actually do want to get married and have kids and have a great job, just not on your terms. Right. And ultimately, you realize people pleasing means that you are probably not going to be satisfied with your choices. And ultimately, when you realize my decisions, my consequences, okay, let me roll that dice, because I'm going to bet on myself more than the approval of others.
That's powerful. Thank you for that clarification. I love it. Your concept is great, and it's definitely it can make a difference in a lot of ways, and helping people really know who they are, have a good identity about themselves, be able to face those things. And you're right. The choices that are yours to make. At the end of the day, you sink or swim, right? It's up to you. And you're right. People sometimes are tight with the idea that somebody else is kind of making them do things, as opposed to them making those decisions. But it's not for everyone, and sometimes people need the assistance. And I love it. So it's perfect timing that we had this show today, because of your transition, and you're actually going more on a deeper side. So business, otherwise, you're helping them really just be themselves and being better at handling any type of conflict in a way.
Yep.
So Jerry, we've just exceeded the hour here, but and we can have another hour easily. But so, what is maybe some of your best advice you can give to our audiences right now?
Yeah. I think if I had to give maybe 3 action steps, the first is to generate awareness. Right? Why do I believe what I believe? Why do I do what I do? How did I arrive at this point? The second is, now that I have this awareness, what adjustments do I need to make? So the first is awareness. The second is adjustments, right? To say, okay, well, how do I tweak these things? What is no longer serving me? What are some ideas I want to try or to experiment with? And then 3 is accountability, right? Find that support network. So awareness, adjustments, and accountability, to make sure that the adjustments that I make for myself are actually going to stick. Or if I decide I don't like them, then I'm, hey, well, it was a nice experiment, and I can, go back to what I was used to. So I would say try those 3 things. Number one, so you're not just caught in the rat race and you just are just running and you're like, why am I running? Right. What am I doing? Like, am I just paying bills and just living for the weekends? Well, how did I get here? Right. And to say, well, you know what? I have a choice in the matter. I can change things. And if I do change things, let me start with small things that are easy and feasible. And then, let me make sure I have a support network so that I don't just flake on myself and break promises I made to myself. So I would say those are 3 things to just play around with and see what happens.
Powerful stuff, man. Thank you so much. This been real. It's been fun. I learned a lot. I've, I know I put some couple of my cents there, but really, this was your show, and you've shared with us some real valuable things that I think it's good to be reminded of. It doesn't matter how much you know, you always learn new trend, and you've thrown a couple of good ones that we can all use in our personal life or business world, right? So thank you, Jerry, and good luck with the rebranding and just keep up the great work out there, and helping people. So that brings us to the end, folks. So Jerry, thank you so much.
Welcome.
And folks, you're welcome. And folks, this been real, and hope you enjoyed this particular show. Let's stay tuned for the next one. So I'm Hurricane H. We'll be talking soon. Bye for now.
There's a lot of talk all over the internet these days about the remarkable benefits of Carbon-60, and baby boomers are especially excited about it. Whatever generation you're in, if you want more energy, better health, and a boost in vitality, we invite you to try Greska's Carbon-60, a stunning development in free radical destruction. Being much smaller in size than conventional antioxidants derived from fruits and vegetables, it is far more bioavailable to quickly mend the toxin-crippled cells in your body. Greska's Carbon-60 is the only C60 product that is made without the use of undesirable solvents. The only one. Greska's Carbon-60 was developed by a brilliant NASA carbon scientist, and 95% report positive results from this Nobel Prize-winning technology in just 4 days. Visit c-60.com. That's c-60.com or call 720-600-6040.